different kinds of topics, everything from crypto to relationships to politics to all kinds of stuff. So the convention is really a good place if you want to be around like-minded Black folks who are very forward-thinking and are really building strong families, things like that. Miami, let's see, I see Jamal from Miami, Lolita from Dallas, Fernando from Los Angeles. Shout out to LA. Edna, Las Vegas. I was in Las Vegas last week. Kibibi from Seattle. Very nice. I like Seattle. It rains too much. Deborah, Northern California. Ashley, peace and blessings to you too. Let's see. Jurupa Valley for Kristen. James is from Atlanta. You got to always love Atlanta. My God, Atlanta's. I'm going to need a house in Atlanta. I love Atlanta. And so Anita out of Phoenix, Arizona. Way too hot, but I love it. My sister lived there. Lisa from Philadelphia. That's like a second home to me. I love Philadelphia. Malcolm from Naptown, Indianapolis, right up the road from where I live. My sister lives there. Lolita, Dallas. Jamal, Michigan. And James is out of Bermuda. Very nice. Very nice. Well, welcome to the Dr. Boyce Book Club. And if you want to know why the book club was created, it's because I wanted to do something with you guys that would allow us to establish a foundational framework of understanding some of the most important ideas in the Black community. As you know, I don't have a lot of trust in the educational system. And I say this as a person who has had a lot of education. I was in school for a long time. Y'all know that. And I taught at universities and all that stuff. And I've been real intrigued for a long time with the fact that despite the fact that we have so many educated Black people, so many Black folks that are supposed to be successful and everything else, I didn't understand why we weren't making progress on certain issues. Like, why are we going backward if everybody's telling us we're going forward? Unless they've convinced you that forward is backward and backward is forward, or good is bad and bad is good. And then as you get older, you start to realize, like, wait a minute, okay, now I get it. You're controlling us, right? You're managing us in a certain way that's going to keep us sort of, in line, like good slaves, making sure we do your. Sorry, I'm going to clear my throat. That we're doing work that's going to keep you in your agenda kind of moving forward, and our agenda isn't even on the radar screen, right? And what I've learned is that you can't depend on white people to create an adequate Black agenda. It's not their job. It's not in their interest. The best Black agenda that white America can create for Black people is is a Black agenda that is in a supportive role to a white agenda, right? So if I hire a maid and I really want my house cleaned, and the maid says, "What should I do with my time today that's going to make me happy?" Maybe I would be tempted to say, well, there's a broom and a vacuum cleaner, in the closet, and you could be really happy sweeping the floor today, right? And so I give her, if she would be silly enough to let me pick her agenda, my agenda is always going to be one that says you should be cleaning as much as possible, right? And that's one of the things you have to think about. And when we're talking about liberals and conservatives, we talk about the Black agenda, but a lot of times the things that we think are a Black agenda are really liberal agendas in disguise or conservative agendas in disguise. And so in order to kind of fool us into that, they'll maybe send a person with a black face to say, no, I got a Black agenda, y'all. Here's what Black people need to do. We all need to go vote for the Democrats, right? Or we all need to go support this Republican because the Democrats ain't right? Y'all know how the game works. Y'all know what it is. And so effectively, you get this, you're caught in this big cosmic tug of war between the Democrats and Republicans, where they're sort of fighting for power. That they've always been doing that, and you're a pawn in their power play. Even going back to Abraham Lincoln, we know. I hope you know. If you don't know now, you know. Abraham Lincoln did not free the slaves because he liked Black people. Abraham freed the slaves as a weapon against the South. He said, if I take away your slaves, I'm going to take away your power. Right. That is part of that epic battle. In fact, Dr. Claud Anderson talks. I mentioned this not too long ago. He mentioned that there were, I think, 5 different Emancipation Proclamations, starting with the Revolutionary War. I don't know. Did y'all know that there were 5 different Emancipation Proclamations? So one of the first ones was the American Revolution. The British actually wrote that one. The British, one of the British lords was so afraid of the Americans rebelling against the British that he said, any slave who fights on behalf of the British crown can have his freedom. And then he changed his mind because he said, whoa, wait a minute, if we have a whole bunch of black people running around here with guns, that could be very bad for me and my family. So he changed his mind on that. The South, actually, Jefferson Davis issued an Emancipation Proclamation offering to free all the slaves if the North would acknowledge the South as an independent country, right? So he said, look, if you leave us alone, don't mess with us, we'll let all the slaves go, right? And then, of course, you had Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, and none of those things actually freed the slaves. The slaves were freed by the 13th Amendment, which obviously had that exception that said, if you're convicted of a crime, then we can make you a slave again, which that little tiny exemption kind of messed everything up. That's why the prisons are to this day filled with black people. So what I want to kind of look at here in Dr. Claud Anderson's book, which is called Black Labor, White Wealth. As you know, last week we read all the way up to page 16. I'm going to jump up, page 15. I'm going to jump to page 15. And what Dr. Anderson does in page 15 of Black Labor, White Wealth, which you can actually find at powernomics.com. And if you want to see my books, you can go to drboycebooks.com. That's drboycebooks.com. Powernomics.com is where you can get all Dr. Anderson's books. And if he doesn't have any books in stock, you can get them from us. But I'd rather you buy them from him because he's the Godfather, and I want us to support the Godfather in every way that we can. You should definitely support him before you support these other educators that are not giving you what you need. And so here, I'm just going to read this, and then I'm going to kind of break it down as we go along, okay? All right, so here we go. Conservative social forces are the protectors of the status quo in the good old days. After using government to amass wealth, power, and resources, conservative white power structures have long espoused socio-political policies that reflect their, quote, pull up the gangplank mentality. Powerful white conservatives profess commitment to capitalism and insist that wealth stays in the hands of the private wealthy class, which has most benefited from the inequalities in the system. They rigidly oppose any societal changes regarding race and resources. This places them in direct opposition to and in conflict with blacks. Conservatism, of course, comes from the root word to conserve, or hold on to what one has. In essence, the conservative attitude toward blacks is, quote, if you don't have it, we are not going to let you get it. When considering what should be done for black people, conservatives have espoused a role and solution for blacks that has not changed an iota since the country was founded. Conservatives believe in the natural ordering of human beings and have always preferred that blacks play a servile role in society. So this is where he talks about black conservatives in the book. And he basically says conservatives are seeking to conserve or to keep what's theirs. And really, if you look at the wealthy in America, one of the reasons that America is the government is in so much debt is because wealthy people have really done a good job of making sure they don't pay taxes, and that's a big problem for the government. But which is why when you talk about the reparations issue, reparations shouldn't just come from the government. Reparations should come from the corporations, because the corporations can better afford to pay than the government. Like the corporations are like the local dope dealers who have more money than anybody in the neighborhood. So to me, if you're talking about a reparations deal, I like what Bob Johnson was actually saying when he said that corporations should be helping to write that, $15 trillion check and pay that massive bill that's owed to black people, as opposed to just the government. Okay, so that's when he talks about conservatives, and one other thing about conservatives that make them not necessarily supportive of what black people need to receive proper economic remedies is that conservatives are very much against the idea of any form of wealth redistribution. They tend to feel that the redistribution of wealth, that giving money away to poor people or anybody that deserves it outside of themselves is, they start using words like, that's socialism, that's communism, and as if those are bad words. Well, words like socialism, communism, and Marxism are not inherently bad. We just stigmatize them to make them bad. I've studied, some Marxism, and some of those ideas are actually pretty good. Karl Marx, who originated Marxism, has some really good critiques about capitalism. But one of the things about Marxism, though, is that I don't necessarily think I want to live in a country that operates on Marxism, because they don't tend to have very much money. And this is where you get into the liberal space. One shortcoming of the liberals, the reason the liberals have not helped black people achieve economic justice. So let's start. So the conservatives, I want to repeat that. The conservatives haven't helped black people achieve economic justice because they don't believe in the redistribution of wealth. right? They believe they come up with this silly narrative of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all that, even though they don't do that, right? When their corporations start failing and they need money, they're the first ones to sign up, to get government handouts. The PPP loans and all that, it went to the wealthy corporations, right? So that's all kind of silly. It's all kind of a big front. But the reason the liberals have not achieved economic justice for Black people is because liberals are more focused on the social issues. They don't talk about the money. They don't bring up the money. So effectively, what a lot of liberals and Democrats will talk about, if you listen to their rhetoric, they'll talk a lot about Black Lives Matter and defund the police and just all these other things, or let's treat each other nicer, right? And whatever, as a remedy for racism, as if treating each other nicer is going to fix systematic racism, but they don't talk about the money at all. Right. And that is a big failing of many Black movements all throughout history. Many Black movements in our community failed because they had too much of a communist, Marxist, socialist orientation. So a bunch of Marxists come up and they say, hey, we want you to have a revolution against these capitalist pigs that are oppressing you because they're oppressing the rest of the world. So we sign up and we become Black Panthers, which for some people meant also becoming a trained Marxist. The leaders of Black Lives Matter are all trained Marxists. And unfortunately, in that whole conversation on Marxism, there becomes a very anti, almost like talking about money is just a bad thing. Like anything that discusses the development of an economic base or a capital base or building wealth as a tool and a weapon and a shield to allow you to have power in this world, not just in America, but throughout the world, that is sort of shunned. They don't want to talk about the money, right? They want to talk about the injustice and everything else. Justice, 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 without understanding and acknowledging that in America, justice costs money. It's hard to get justice in America if you ain't got no money, right? So effectively, a lot of your liberal friends will talk all day about your voting rights. They'll talk all day about, all these other things, but they don't really talk about the money. But the money matters, right? These politicians can't get elected without the money. They're talking about the money in what I call the grown-up conversation. They got you at the kids' table. The kids' table, it's like they're going to feed you rhetoric and things that are going to get you riled up, right? The Republicans and Democrats do that, right? So the Republicans may give you stuff like, they have the gay agenda and we want to fight abortion, right? And you get all riled up about abortion, the gay agenda, so you give them their vote based on that. And the Democrats get you riled up about, somebody got shot. JoJo Smith in Florida got shot, and we're all upset, and we're painting murals of JoJo and crying in the streets and holding hands and singing "We Shall Overcome," as if saving JoJo is going to really make a difference for all of us. And it doesn't mean JoJo doesn't matter, but what's happening in the background at the grown-ups table is they're having conversations about the money. Because you can't run for hardly any office in this country without having a massive economic base. When Raphael Warnock ran for the Senate down in Georgia, he wasn't sitting around in private with his big donors talking about justice related issues. They were talking about money. They were talking about the $250 million he needed to raise in order to even run for the Senate. Same thing is true with any Black politician that you name, from Barack Obama all the way down. So effectively, both parties have failed to address the economic injustice that Black people have experienced and the justice that we deserve from an economic front. So let me keep reading. So here on page 15, and those of you who are listening on the outside, we are in the Dr. Boyce Book Club. We meet every Wednesday night at 8:30. You can actually join us at blackkeystogreatness.com. That's blackkeystogreatness.com. I'm going to actually shut off the live feed very, very soon, so to give you a chance. So if you want to go to Black Keys to Greatness and join us, you can join us. We're going to come in here and we're going to talk about books like Powernomics every Wednesday night at 8:30, and kind of break them down so we can all kind of understand what's going on with this. I'm gonna put the URL on the screen. Give me 1 second. There it is. There's the URL. Okay. So it also says here, in many ways, white liberal policies have been as injurious to Blacks as those of conservatives. Neither liberals nor the conservatives have offered any programs or resources for improving the overall socioeconomic condition of Blacks. Socioeconomic, not just social, but socioeconomic. They're connected. Your social condition is deeply connected to your economic condition. So you have to, when you're talking about the liberals, you have to address the fact that many communities that are run by liberals and Democrats, our friends and allies, those communities are torn apart. If you're running my community and you are my hero and you're supposed to make my life better, Why is it that little children are being shot on my street? Why is it that the trash isn't being picked up and there's cracks in the sidewalks and everything's torn apart? If you go to Chicago, which is one of the cities where there's a tremendous amount of economic apartheid, that's the term I've been using, because in Chicago, like many cities, has clear economic apartheid. I go to the north side and I go downtown. It's extremely nice. And we're, again, mind you, we have a Democratic mayor, Lori Lightfoot. So I go to the north and I go to the downtown area. It is beautiful. It's so nice. You got multi-billion-dollar buildings. You've got the cleanest streets in the world, safest everything, right? Go to the south side or the west side, suddenly the economic apartheid kicks in, and this is something that they don't address. The Democrats will talk to you about everything except for the economic apartheid. So they'll come in and they'll get you riled up over some justice issue. But if you go down to the south side of Chicago on the west side, you start seeing cracks in the sidewalk, trash everywhere, torn down buildings, abandoned buildings, just dilapidated neighborhoods, no industry, no investment whatsoever. I don't really understand what it will take to get people to start talking about this. I don't know if we are just so, what's the word? So accustomed to that condition. If we too, maybe our own white supremacy leads us to think that white people deserve to live better than we do, and that being black is supposed to be a form of misery in itself. I don't know at what point, what it's going to take to get people to talk about that. I told you personally, I've decided I'm not going to vote for any politician, Democrat or Republican, that's not going to address those issues directly. And so it says basically neither liberals nor conservatives have offered any programs or resources for improving the overall socioeconomic condition of blacks. While conservatives have consistently sought to sink blacks' ship, liberals have simply rearranged the deck chairs in the sinking ship, so that blacks can be more comfortable. So Dr. Anderson, again, he wrote this book 30 years ago, but in the early 90s, he was writing here that liberals basically take the same chaos and they just rearrange the ships on the chairs on the sinking ship, and they make you more comfortable as you're going down. So it's like you're in the hospital and you're already dying. So they don't make you better. They don't actually help you come back to life. They just give you some methadone or whatever, or some sort of heroin or something to numb you up so you feel good as you're dying, right? So the symbolism that's fed to you. Remember, symbolism. I told you my wife, her area is the subconscious mind. She literally just finished a 30-hour lecture series on the subconscious mind. And the three things, and I'm going to repeat this 10 million times because this actually digs into your subconscious mind. She said the three things that impact the subconscious mind are trauma, repetition, and symbolism. Those are the three things that will impact the subconscious mind. So they understand these things. So when they give you the symbolism, that's them sort of subconsciously saying, we're your friend. Things are going to get better. A change is going to come. It's going to be okay. Lord Jesus is going to help you. And just make sure you bring your booty to the pole, make you bring your soul to the polls, whatever it takes to get you to the polls. We're going to do that. So we're going to make you comfortable in your misery, where those who are more alert kind of look back and they say, wait a minute, I'm comparing 2021 to 2011 to 2001 to 1991. And nothing's changed. Nothing's changed. We keep doing the same thing, but nothing's changing. At what point do you speak up about that? So let's keep going. Conservatives and liberals have historically approached black issues differently. Compared to ambiguous liberal approaches, conservatism is typically straightforward concerning the issue of race. It is not difficult to uncover conservative intentions in programs and public policies. Conservatives boldly proclaim that their positions reflect the sentiments of mainstream society, as well as the principles of the first European settlers, who established a self-serving system that made it easy for them to hoard wealth and power. It is this imbalance that conservatives seek to conserve. They frequently say that blacks are poor because they have unacceptable attitudes and behaviors, and have failed to take advantage of opportunities because they are basically inferior human beings. Over the past 3 decades, national opinion surveys have reported a growing conservatism among white society. Undoubtedly, some of it is a response to the growing uncertainty of the times. Societal clashes on such issues as abortion, family values, immigration, taxation, gender issues, and crime have contributed to the popularity of conservatism. However, the core issue of white conservatives springs from race. They oppose government policies and programs that hint at the redistribution. Remember, I said that word earlier, redistribution. The redistribution of public and private resources and power to benefit blacks. So one thing that and I know that some of you in here are conservatives, and it's okay to be a Republican. I have friends that are Democrats and Republicans. I told you we're black first. Black first means As long as whatever you're doing is being done on behalf of the Black community, I don't care. I'm totally okay with that. But I would say to my conservative friends, and I see this a little bit, I see some of the Black conservatives really challenging their party. I would say to the Black conservatives that you have to help your party understand that you can't do right by Black folks without redistributing some of that wealth. You have to come off some of that money because that money is owed to us. We're owed $15 trillion in reparations, and there's no way around that, right? So a conservative that wants to do the right thing, that wants to be down with Black folks, needs to cut a check. If you're not cutting a check, then all you're doing is running your mouth, and words have no value. It's really your actions that actually matter. So the same thing is true on the liberal side. On the liberal side, what you have to do, because some of you are Democrats, and that's okay too. I do not care about that. I don't pick my friends based on who you voted for. But the liberals, what you've got to do is you've got to get your party to focus. You've got to say, look, stop bringing me a bunch of other stuff that has nothing to do with what we need. We want money. We want our money back. Give us our money back, and then we can talk about all the other issues that are connected. Then we can talk about the gay stuff and the women's, feminism and all these other things that whatever else you want to talk about. We can talk about those things later. But first, you must cut the check. If you don't cut the check, then there's nothing else to talk about. That's really important. So let me keep going. So digging deeper here, modern conservatism began its ascendance in the late 1960s as a white backlash to the civil rights movement, Black power protests, and urban riots. The demands of the Black protests for improved living conditions through more wealth, power, and community control shocked and frightened white society, which responded as it frequently does in times of civil turmoil and uncertainty. The privileged class appealed to conservatism to reassert the supremacy of white authority and its exclusive claim to power and wealth, breeding Black conservatism. Black conservatism is as old as Black enslavement, but 3 decades of popular white conservatism, coupled with social and economic devastation of Black America, has attracted an increasing number of Blacks to the conservative political movement. Black conservatives present a potential danger to their race because of their alignment with white conservatives who have always been anti-Black. When Black-white conservative alignments occur, Black conservatives become a liability to Blacks and an asset to whites. Now, when I talk about, when he mentions that, what I'm thinking about when I'm hearing this is I'm not thinking about some of the Black conservatives who really are representing the Black community. I have no more issue with a Black conservative as I do with a Black liberal, and you know who you are if you're in that category. What I'm really talking about are Black conservatives who are not really Black first. If you are a Black man who happens to be a conservative, that's very different from being a conservative who happens to be Black, right? And you can tell that from the rhetoric, right? So you look at, for example, a Candace Owens. A Candace Owens is a conservative who happens to be Black. You look at it, even her life, even in her life, she's married to a white guy. She kind of parakeets whatever the conservatives are saying in order to get more support for the right and for Trump and everything else. And she does that in exchange for power and a platform, right? If the conservative support was taken away from Candace Owens, she would have nothing. She'd have no money. She'd have no platform, none of that stuff. But instead, she's very popular because she's got this conservative backing. If she deviated from that, they would probably abandon her. On the liberal side, you might have, say, like a Mark Lamont Hill, who unfortunately ends up carrying the water for the white liberals, right? So and that also comes with a lot of benefits, right? You get to do a lot of speaking engagements. I think Mark, at least back in the day, this guy used to do maybe 5 or 6 speaking engagements a week at $20,000 a pop. So you're making $50,000 to $100,000 a week doing speaking engagements. Your books, you're going to get book deals because one of the most lucrative things in America is to become the Black darling of white liberals, right? When you become that you get in that Don Lemon space, or the other guy, Trevor Noah with Comedy Central, right? There's a lot of support there. There's a lot of money that comes with that. It's not always necessarily evil, but the problem is that it's not so much Black first. It's like you're in a fast car, but Black folks aren't driving that car. White folks are driving that car. And if you act like you get to take control of that steering wheel, then that's when they're going to put you out of the car. So what has to occur, in my view, is you have to have leadership in the Black community that says my top priority is the Black community. Some days I'm going to sound like a liberal. Some days I'm going to sound like a conservative because I'm looking for the best ideas that are going to help the Black community no matter what. And we have to be able to support that. So for example, with Dr. Claud Anderson, with him having his think tank, he has the Harvest Institute. We have to support that. We have to support the things that we believe in, and this requires us to get out of the victim mentality and the welfare mentality. And what I mean by that, the victim welfare mentality is one that says that we don't see ourselves as being the primary engine, economically and otherwise, for the things that we believe in. We see ourselves as the beneficiary of somebody else's engine. So, for example, there's some communities or some groups of people where if you go to them and you say, there's no grocery store in this neighborhood, they'll say, gosh, I wish somebody would build a grocery store in this neighborhood. Whereas if I were to go talk to my friends from the Nation of Islam or the Hebrew Israelites, and I say, there's no grocery store in this neighborhood, you know what they would say? They would say, oh, let's get together and have a meeting and figure out how we're going to raise money and build a grocery store in our neighborhood, right? And that's a mindset, right? They see themselves as the primary engine and the primary driver of what's happening in their communities, of what's happening in their families. If their child isn't educated, then they say, we need to educate our kids, right? Whereas there are some of us who say, gosh, I hope white folks will give money to build a school and give us teachers who will educate our kids, right? So I think that sort of disempowerment works against us, because when somebody else is kind of doing the job for you, they're going to do the job the way they want to do it. They're going to, if you say, hey, I need you to educate my child, they're going to educate your child the way they want to educate your child. If you say, hey, I need somebody to give me political empowerment, well, they're going to do what they think is best. And then it's going to be a take it or leave it kind of thing, right? So ultimately, understanding how to be the driver of what happens in your own community is extremely important. Black people should be the primary educators of our own kids. We should be the creators of many of our own jobs. We should be the ones who develop our own opportunities and possibilities, and that will allow us to then sort of make sure that we're able to prioritize ourselves. Okay, so let me keep going here. Let me keep reading. All right, so I'm on page 16 of the book Black Labor, White Wealth by Dr. Claud Anderson. You can get a copy if you don't have one at powernomics.com. And in my books are at drboycebooks.com. So feel free to go take a look at either one. It's up to you. All right, so it says that by mouthing the social and economic views of white conservatives, Black conservatives convert confusion of their personal racial identity to a confusion in the minds of Black people about the real issue facing them. Black conservatives operate under misleading colors. As an old farmer said, quote, they run with the hounds while pretending friendship and brotherhood with the rabbits. The confusion caused by their schizophrenic behavior provides a public cover for anti-Black attitudes and activities and makes them appear as nothing more than white racists in blackface minstrel makeup. And so you keep going here. He says, becoming a conservative has historically provided personal rewards to individual Blacks with few downsides because of the powerlessness of the Black community to hold accountable those members who turn against it. So what he's saying here is that because you don't have a process of punishing people who harm the Black community, everybody is there to exploit. Everybody exploits if there's no penalty for the exploitation. If there's no penalty for putting businesses from other communities in your neighborhood, then everybody's going to come to your community to build their next business, right? Because we believe everything should be open and fair. But if I go and I open a business in the Chinese neighborhood, they're going to make sure that I'm out of business by the end of the year. If I go to an Italian neighborhood and open up a business, they're not going to support me because they understand the importance of putting your economic muscle behind the things you believe in and the people that you believe in. And also, when he's talking about the rewards for individual Blacks, that's kind of the game, right? You have a lot of scenarios on both sides of the aisle. It's not just a Democrat or Republican thing. It's really both, where you'll have individuals that will get individual rewards in exchange for their power in the Black community. So, for example, when there was that whole thing with Comcast trying to get approval for a massive multi-billion-dollar merger that they were going to do, they went to Al Sharpton. They made him a board. They put him on they made him a board member. They put him on some board or something and paid him a few $100,000 apparently to be on the board. And Byron Allen felt that that putting him on this board was his compensation for him to co-sign on this multi-billion-dollar merger. So they make so the argument is, if we just go and find the right Black person and give him a few $100,000, then we can go and do a multi-billion-dollar deal behind the scenes. This isn't just done in the United States. This is done all throughout the world. Why do you think Nigeria produces more oil than damn near every country on the planet. If maybe they are number one. I got to go double check. But Nigeria is up there in oil production. But yet, when I was in Nigeria, I saw millions of people that were starving to death, that were living on the streets. How is that true? How is that possible? That you're producing as much oil as damn near every Saudi Arabian country out here, but yet your people are on the street starving. Well, it's because if I'm Dutch Shell Oil, what I'm doing is I basically pay the people at the top really well, make sure they're doing really well. And I saw these people. These were the people that were actually giving me the tour of Nigeria. I just didn't say anything, but because I was one of them, so-called in the elite class, they were kind of sharing things with me and I was just listening. I wasn't really saying much. I was just listening. And basically, you take care of the elite, which is very cheap. And then the elite give you access to go in and get billions of dollars in oil out of the ground at the expense of the people. And so when somebody like, say, Ken Saro-Wiwa back in the 90s speaks up about that and starts to protest on the issue, you talk to the local authorities and you say, okay, this guy's a problem. Next thing you know, Ken Saro-Wiwa is dead, right? And this is kind of what has happened for a very long time. They don't just do it here. They do it all around the world. And this is something you have to be very conscious of. All right, so Dr. Anderson also says here that blacks found that it was not difficult to establish beneficial relationships with whites once they accepted a subordinate position and committed themselves to placing the welfare of the white class first. So if you're subordinate to whites and you kind of go along with whatever they put in front of you, then they're going to treat you very well. It's not like they're going to always hate you because you're black. It's when you don't know your place, when you kind of think you're supposed to drive the car as opposed to just be in the trunk. That's when you start having your problems. Once that was agreed upon, tacitly or otherwise, blacks were then entitled to various forms of paternalistic protection, Christian charity, and meritorious recognition. And this goes back all the way to slavery. White conservatives then conferred special status and recognition to conservative blacks as exceptional or acceptable. Accordingly, black conservatives who placed their personal advancement above the welfare of their race often gained significant personal and financial benefits, recognition, and access to power. And this isn't just a conservative thing. One of the things that I've even heard people say this. I not too long ago, there was another scholar who I guess got really mad at me because I said something. I always say stuff I shouldn't be saying. I speak out of turn all the time. And he said, "You're a failed scholar. You're a failed TV personality." He said something like that. And basically what he was saying was, well, white people won't put you on TV, so that makes you a failure. White people would not hire you at their, don't want to hire you at their university, so that makes you a failure. But as Cornel West's battle with Harvard University, for example, shows, in many cases, it's the most effective scholars that are actually the ones that get booted out. It's the ones who actually speak up against the power structure that are going to have the greatest problem. So one thing you have to do if you really want to push the black cause is you must replace white supremacy with a commitment to black excellence, black pride, and black strength, right? You have to take that B1 philosophy and you must replace these other philosophies with something that's B1. And B1 kind of means that, I'm going to do what's right for myself and my community, even if it means I make enemies in the process. In fact, not only do I accept the fact that people won't like what I'm doing, I embrace that. I almost see that as a sign of success because if I'm in a basketball game, and I want to beat the other team and I play my best, if they're cheering for me, if they're saying good shot, good job, I really like it when you get the ball, then that probably means I'm doing something wrong, right? A lot of times we're trained to put the ball in the wrong basket and we think we're doing good because the other team is cheering for us. But I don't really see how in America, in a country where you're fighting for scarce resources, where there's a lot of white entitlement that you got to fight against, I don't see a world where black people can really get what we truly deserve and have the majority of white folks cheering that on. I just don't see that because $15 trillion is a lot of money. They're going to fight you for that money. They're not going to just hand it over and say, good luck, good job. We're really happy for you. They're going to, if they pay, they'll be kicking and screaming the entire time. And so sometimes I think that, when you're talking about how we measure our success as children, we measure our successes based on a lot of symbolic validation that tends to come from the people that we identify as our oppressors, right? We applaud when we say get a degree, like you graduate from Yale or something. It's like, oh, you're the first black person to graduate from Yale. Okay, that's fine, but I don't see many white people bragging about the fact that they graduated from an HBCU. I don't see them saying, well, you made white history because black people accepted you. But we feel that we make black history when white people accept us, right? Or even little things like if you go become an actor and you win an Oscar or a Grammy or whatever, that we get really excited about that. Oh, that's the first Black person to win Best Director or to get an Emmy or whatever. And I think that all these things kind of put you in this weird little trap, because when you start to actually realize, hey, this isn't fair, this isn't right, I want something better, and you start speaking up against the person that holds the key to your validation, the keys to your self-esteem, well, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to take all that away in order to punish you, right? It's like a woman dating a man, where the woman's self-esteem isn't intact, and let's say that she only feels beautiful if her boyfriend tells her that she's beautiful. She doesn't believe she's beautiful. She believes she's ugly. But when he says you're beautiful, she feels beautiful, right? So if she steps up and says, "Hey, this relationship isn't fair. I think you need to treat me better." Well, first thing he's gonna do is he's gonna say, "Well, we'll sit down with your ugly ass," right? He's gonna mess with her head. Right, a lot of oppression is very psychological. So one of the steps that I took to overcome my own psychological oppression is I really trained myself to ignore any and all signs of white validation as a necessitator for me to feel like a successful Black man. It doesn't mean that I don't accept it. If white folks want to, there's some good white folks out in the world, I guess. I don't believe that they don't exist. They're out there, right? In fact, I don't even hate anybody, period. The hate is a bad energy to carry around anyway. But, you know, I'm okay if white people are mad at me. Like, it doesn't bother me. I don't want them to hire me for a job. I don't care. I don't care. There's no job they can hire me that I would want, actually, including president of the United States. I wouldn't even want that job. I don't care. I've been beaten up by white media. I mean, really bad, to the point where they everything they said was terrible about me. And I was really happy by the fact that it really truly did not matter to me, because I knew that I was right, and I knew that I could defend my point of view, period. I think also having some economic independence, it really helps a lot, because another thing that you have to understand about oppression is that money is one of the leading tools of oppression as well. That if I see you get out of line, then I'm going to take away your purse string. So sometimes people will give you something just so they can take it away, right? I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna give you an honest to God truth. Me and my wife do that all the time with the kids. Whenever one of the kids, don't tell the kids this, because I don't want them to know the secret. But whenever they act like they really want something, like, "Mom, I really want a new pair of shoes, a new pair of Coach shoes or something or whatever, or I want, I don't know, a video game or whatever." Sometimes we'll buy it for them just so we can threaten to take it away if they get out of line. Right? We'll be like, "Oh yeah, we could take his phone. If we take that new phone he likes, then he'll definitely clean up his room," right? Because you're always looking for something. You're always looking for a way to control Pinocchio with the strings, right? And so the best way for Pinocchio to be free is to cut all the strings, cut all the avenues of codependence that are being used by that oppressive force in order to control you. And the number one force they use to control you is money. So when you're teaching your child to become an entrepreneur and to have their own business and to have the independent wealth, you're cutting a substantial string that's used to control millions of Black people. But then also you must free their mind. You must free their mind to find some other method of validation that's going to make them feel whole and complete, that isn't tethered to, this false validation that comes from the oppressor, whether it's awards or fancy acknowledgments and degrees or whatever. Like, that stuff literally means nothing to me. I can't think of any awards anybody could ever give me that would make me think that I'm a better person then than I am right now. I know who I am right now. I'm okay with that, guy. I don't need you to acknowledge that. I don't need you to tell me that I'm smart. I know that I'm smart, right? So these little things like that are really important, because that's what gives you that true freedom to be able to move and do what you want to do. Okay, so let's keep going. Accordingly, Black conservatives who place their personal advancement above the welfare of their race often gain significant and personal financial benefits. In political and social situations, a Black conservative is closely akin to Sambo in Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. In a historical context, a Sambo was Black America's worst nightmare. The stereotypical Sambo was more than a minstrel man, a buffoon, and a plantation darky. Sambo represented the extraordinary success of social control, which was the ultimate goal of a slavery conditioning process that transplanted a white mindset into a Black personality. So a lot of Sambos in the world, they manufacture those en masse. The symbolic betrayal of the Black race. The term Uncle Tom is not an appropriate label for an individual who is, quote, white on the inside and black on the outside, and sells out his race by placing his personal gains with whites ahead of the rights and gains of his people. Contrary to popular usage of the label, the character Uncle Tom was not the culprit in Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom was a brave man with dignity who cared about his family and race. The real villain was another black slave named Sambo. He was totally committed to the white master and used every opportunity to undermine the other slaves. Sambo, in many respects, was like today's black conservatives. Sambo always followed the white master, Simon Legree, and offered to show him how to tree the coons. It was Sambo who beat Uncle Tom to death for refusing to whip a black female slave or sell out his people. Uncle Tom tried to empower his people by understanding and beating the social and political structure wherever he could. Uncle Tom felt it was important to get his people across the river to freedom. He risked his life to do so. The Sambo character personified a very successful social control created by conservatives. He was such a successful phenomenon that the concept he personified became a great danger to blacks, a greater danger to blacks than Uncle Tom. As blacks move towards structuring policies and racial accountability, it will be very important for them to know who helps and who hurts the race. Sambo was the black slave character in numerous novels and movies who was willing to pick up a weapon and defend his white master against the approaching Union army or hide the master's silver from northern carpetbaggers. What is the difference between the fictional Sambo character and today's real-life blacks who joined the conservative movement to argue against affirmative action, black reparations, and set-asides? Now, see, that's the problem, though. The thing is, a lot of people would argue that you got the Sambos in the Democratic Party, too. If you go talk to, for example, a James Clyburn, I don't know, maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, but last time I checked, James Clyburn won't even say the word reparations, right? So the white supremacy, and one area where Dr. Anderson and I might debate a little bit and have a disagreement is that I think the Sambos are across the board. The Congressional Black Caucus, unfortunately, maybe perhaps because they're just not empowered to do anything, I don't know. But a lot of folks are not happy with the Congressional Black Caucus either. So this idea that because the conservatives are so bad that the Democrats are automatically better and good for black people, I don't think that's true either. I think that you have the Sambos across the aisle. So he says, isn't espousing a colorblind, race-neutral melting pot society a modern way of hiding the master's silver? What are black conservatives conserving when black America is burdened by poverty, crime, unemployment, homelessness, and other social pathologies? Based upon historical treatment alone, there should be a general antagonism between blacks and conservatives. Though conservatives claim that they are not racist, for centuries, they have opposed programs and policies to help blacks. So now I'm going to skip a little bit forward and go to page 19 of Black Labor, White Wealth. In case you just came in, this is where we're reading Black Labor, White Wealth by Dr. Claud Anderson. You can get a copy of the book at powernomics.com. My books are at drboycebooks.com. If you want to take a look at any of my books that I've written, feel free to take a look there. But go get Dr. Anderson's books before you buy any book of mine. I don't want you to even consider buying my books until you get his, because without him, there is no me. And I'm going to always make sure you guys understand that. And so here now he talks about the Black-Jewish Alliance. He says, it is often a conclusion of popular history that blacks and Jews have always shared a strong alliance. However, in their struggles to escape bondage and second-class citizenship, blacks have had few temporary and no permanent allies. At various times, abolitionists, liberals, and individual Jews have provided visible support to black causes and sometimes at great personal risk and expense. They have lobbied state and federal legislative branches of government, contributed financial resources, provided surrogate leadership, and given their lives to assist blacks. But these contributions were made by individuals and not by Jews as a class, religious, or racial body of Samaritans. Prior to the 20th century, there were no known recorded public commitments of Jewish organizations to help blacks. Beyond their good intentions, neither the abolitionists nor individual Jews achieved great success in helping blacks due to major philosophical flaws in their strategies. The flaw in the abolitionist strategy was that they did not recognize or treat slavery as the economic issue that it was. They made the abolishment of slavery a moral issue, which it was not. As a moral issue, the abolitionists appealed to the conscience of slaveholders concerning right and wrong. These appeals did not damage the slaveholders' profits from slavery. And that's one of the things that's important, too. You have to understand that slavery and your oppression and your exploitation to this day is an economic issue. The economics is everywhere. It's right in the center of the conversation. And I really encourage you to understand that the conversations about racial justice that don't include the economic discussions are not thorough topics of this important issue. By not treating slavery as an economic issue, they perhaps unwittingly supported slavery and undermined their own anti-slavery arguments. They continued to use rather than boycott slave-produced products such as cotton goods, tobacco products, table foods, alcoholic beverages, iron products, and jewelry made from gold and silver. They could have withheld their money from the shoe industry, insurance and shipping companies, and other businesses that directly and indirectly made their profits from black slavery. After Reconstruction, the efforts of individual Jews to assist blacks were flawed because they encouraged blacks to do something that Jews themselves did not want to do: assimilate into the broader white culture. Let me read that again. After Reconstruction, the efforts of individual Jews to assist blacks were flawed because they encouraged blacks to do something that Jews themselves did not want to do: assimilate into the broader white culture. Jews helped blacks to secure civil and voting rights, but these legal rights, though important in principle, gave the appearance of making blacks self-sufficient, when in fact these gains could not appreciably change blacks' wealth and power base. Worse still, the socio-economic alliance between Jews and blacks did not emphasize blacks learning the self-sufficiency skills and strategies mastered by the Jews. So to some extent, I think that what Dr. Anderson is saying here is that they did things to give you the appearance of equality, but didn't actually give you what you needed to truly be equal or in the game, right? You maybe you know what it makes me think about? It makes me think about I saw a video one time where there was a 2-year-old who wanted to play video games like his brother. And so his brother, who was playing a real video game with a real joystick, gave the 2-year-old a joystick. And the 2-year-old, but the joystick wasn't connected to the game. So the 2-year-old was moving the joystick and he really thought he was playing the game. And he wasn't. He was just moving the joystick. He was just, using energy, moving his arm around. But the game had nothing to do with what he was doing with the joystick. And I think sometimes for black people, that's where we're positioned. We're positioned like that 2-year-old, where we're putting out all this energy, doing all these things, black girl magic, black excellence, black this, black, look at, we're getting excited about all this stuff. Black Lives Matter, all the, everything else. And nothing is actually changing because we're not actually in the game. We're not wired into the game. We're not wired into and connected to the competitive game of global economic power. All right, but we're exerting a lot of energy, so we think that we're in the game. We think that it must be making a difference. When if you look at the actual data, you'll see that no progress has been made. If we're making all this progress, then why is our wealth going down? Why is our wealth going backward? Right? That's extremely important for you to understand. You've got to measure. You've got to have a measuring stick. Just because I'm running in place doesn't mean I'm actually, the fastest man in the world and winning Olympic gold medals. You got to actually time me and have me get in the race to compete against other runners. Then you can tell me how fast I really am. If I'm running by myself and I'm running on the treadmill, then I can, in my mind, think I'm running faster than everybody else, but really I'm not. I'm just a guy on the treadmill. Okay, so let's get off the treadmill because you ain't going nowhere. So here's what Dr. Anderson says here. He says, from the beginning of the alliance in the 1900s, Jews kept their problems and black problems in perspective. Jewish problems came first. Jews did not totally identify with blacks. Jews fleeing persecution in Europe in the first and second decades of the 20th century entered America just as blacks were being forced back into separate but equal worlds of Jim Crowism. The majority of Jews were poor, liberal, and alone. Some were sympathetic to black problems and allied with them against racial bigotry. In the 1920s and 30s, blacks returned the favor by aligning with Jews against religious bigotry and oppression. The alliance benefited each group and presented a common front against some common conservative enemies. The alliance ultimately gave blacks access to high levels of government and the corporate world. In return for Jewish support, blacks gave Jews carte blanche access. Pay attention now. He's getting good. This is getting to the good stuff. Let me put my glasses on because we got to take our time and internalize this. Y'all paying attention now? Pay attention. Let me back up a little. I'm back at one sentence and reread so we can see where the big rope-a-dope starts to happen here. This is not anti-Jewish. This is not anti-anybody. This is really us kind of understanding the game so we can be better players in the game. So he said the alliance ultimately gave blacks access to high levels of government in the corporate world. So you got fancy jobs and you got political offices. You got to be the next Stacey Abrams, and you got to be, the senior manager at some company that was owned by a white guy, right? Now, here's what you gave them instead. Here's what we gave them. In return for Jewish support, blacks gave Jews carte blanche access to every aspect of Black society. Jews established neighborhood businesses that survived strictly off of Black customers. They advised Black leaders on public policy matters. Jews also built entire industries around resources that Blacks controlled or owned, such as sports, entertainment, and music. I don't have a mic, so I'm going to drop my pen on that. And I want y'all to think about that. I want you to think about how all your favorite rappers, y'all know what record labels they work for. Y'all know what it is. I have friends that are rappers. Y'all know that, right? Willie D. Willie D tells me stories about. I asked him. I said, Willie, have you ever met Tupac? He said, yeah. One time I had to go to my record label, and we had to go get our money. And the secretary said, yeah, Tupac was just here, and he had to go upstairs and pull a gun out on this dude to get his money. Ice Cube tells a story about he had to go see his record label with a baseball bat. It's in Straight Outta Compton. This is public information. I'm not revealing anything that you don't already know. He had to remember that scene where he had to go in there with the baseball bat and get his money, right? He wasn't getting that money from a Black man, right? He was getting that money from the people that tend to own these record labels, right? Again, this is not anti-nothing. This is just understanding the game. So what happened here, again, fitting with Dr. Anderson's description of the doctrine of unequal exchange, is this is on page 20 of Black Labor, White Wealth by Dr. Claud Anderson. He's saying that Black folks got their dignity. They got, fancy government jobs. We got, for a few of us, not all of us, just a couple, right? Select Negroes who get fancy government jobs, and also fancy corporate jobs, right? That's where the so-called successful Negro comes from, right? And in exchange, they got to put their businesses in your neighborhood. They got to go into your communities and drill for oil, except instead of drilling for actual oil, they were drilling for rappers, or maybe they were drilling for singers, or drilling for basketball players, or drilling for people that want to go shop at the corner store, right? So they're putting up businesses, and these businesses are entirely dependent on Black people. They weren't going into all the other neighborhoods. They weren't going into the Asian neighborhoods and the Mexicans and the Arabs and all that, right? Because in those communities, you're going to get resistance. You're going to have people that are going to say, no, you're not going to come take all our money. We understand the game. But with Black folks, they were able to come in and just have a pipeline and just suck out all the resources out of the community. So you got your dignity, your self-esteem. You got the this false validation, right? Of saying, look, mama, I made it. I got this fancy government job now. And in exchange, you gave up the real gold. You gave up the actual wealth and power. So it says for nearly half a century, Jews were officially endorsed as the liberal intermediaries between white and Black America. The alliance began to break down as Blacks became increasingly disenchanted with their lack of progress and stagnant socioeconomic conditions. So everybody else is moving forward. You're sitting still. Some Black folks woke up and started noticing that. As the social fortunes of Jews and Blacks began to diverge, the relationship became more paternalistic. Black organizations such as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, and the National Urban League, as well as independent Black leaders, were advised to pursue social integration, upward mobility within white mainstream society, and civil rights. Black leadership was convinced that once Blacks had obtained integration and civil rights, the quality of life would naturally improve for all Blacks. After all, the strategy worked for Jews. As the society, that isn't exactly what they did, though. They built businesses. They have independent economic infrastructure. I remember going to school with some Jewish kids, and I remember our bus used to stop to let the Jewish kids off so they could go to Hebrew school. So they were educated. They've always done in their community the things that I've been saying we need to do with our community. They go to Hebrew school. Y'all need to go to Black Excellence B1 school or something. I don't know what we're gonna call it, but whatever it is, right? Your kids need to go and get the culturally enriched education that's going to help them empower themselves in a society that isn't always going to have the handout that they need in order to survive. They're going to have to go out there and get it. So let me keep reading here instead of talking. Black leadership was convinced that once Blacks had obtained integration and civil rights, the quality of life would improve, blah, blah, blah. As the society began to soften its virulent anti-Semitism in the 1940s, Jews used their newfound mobility to secure wealth and power for themselves. However, a decade after the 1954 desegregation decision and the civil rights movement, not only had Black America's socioeconomic dilemma not been resolved, it was getting worse. Blacks outside of the traditional civil rights organizations became convinced that the only way to improve the conditions of Black America was for Blacks to take complete economic and political control of their communities, institutions, and culture. Many voiced anti-white sentiments that frightened and threatened the white establishment. Through slogans, symbols, and urban riots, Black America informed the nation that having lost faith in the system, they had established alternative Black leadership and were committed to achieving Black power. That sounds pretty good, right? Sounds like we were kind of waking up, right? So we're not the first group of woke Black people to kind of step out and say this ain't right, right? This your grandfather, your grandmother, maybe they did the same thing in the 60s, some of you, right? So they said, but by the 1960s, religious attitudes and socioeconomic conditions have significantly changed for Jews in America. They have become the wealthiest and most influential political group in the nation. They have been accepted into the dominant society with practically unlimited mobility opportunities. They controlled a major share of wealth, businesses, professional and management positions, government influence, and access to institutions of higher education. Having made remarkable social and economic achievements, Jews now had a philosophical base for becoming more conservative. The Black Power protests of the late 1960s moved many Jews closer to right-wing conservative principles. Jews' increased conservatism was reflected in their reversed attitude towards the role of government. Previously, quote, Jews and Blacks were advocates for a strong governmental role in combating discrimination, alleviating the plight of the poor, and aiding social mobility, according to Thomas W. Smith. In a 1990 article entitled Jewish Attitudes Toward Blacks and Race Relations, published in the American Jewish Committee's Jewish sociological paper, Smith wrote that both Jews and Blacks encouraged government involvement to improve the lives of the socially disadvantaged through progressive measures such as the New Deal policies. From the 1930s to 1950s, they used legislative and court systems to pursue integration and broad intervention policies. But according to Smith's attitude survey, after Blacks demanded specific governmental assistance, Jews changed their minds about the role of government. For instance, Smith reported that today, quote, a majority of Jews do not favor government measures to help Blacks, more government spending for Blacks, or the use of busing to achieve school integration, end quote. In response to the specific question, quote, does the government have a special obligation to improve Blacks' living standards? More than 46% of Jews were opposed, and 26% were either neutral or undecided. So what is that saying? That's basically saying that when it comes to Black people getting access to the wealth and power of this country, most non-Black people are unanimously opposed to Black people getting the economic support that we deserve. Right? You don't have any true allies in this game. Not in this game. My measure of a true ally among white people. So if you're white and you're listening, I want you to pay attention now. If you want my support, if you want me to think that you really are truly my political friend, here's what you need to do. You need to support the idea that Black people are owed $15 trillion, no, nothing less, in reparations for 250 years of the most brutal slavery known to man, plus another 100 years of Jim Crow, plus the war on drugs, the crack era, and all the other things that y'all have done to us that we may not even know about. Right? You have to support that. If you're not talking about the money, then don't talk to me at all. If it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. So moving forward, from the 1930s to 1950s, they used the legislative and court systems to pursue integration and broad intervention policies. Let's see. Let me keep going. So, according to the Smith report, Jewish attitudes on the question of the government's responsibility to assist a structurally handicapped group, such as Jews were years ago, has now turned 180 degrees. By the start of the 20th century, they were pro-government involvement. By mid-century, they were opposed. Harold Cruz, in his book Plural but Equal, offers his explanation for the Jews turning towards conservatism and away from Blacks. Quote, the opposition of Jewish liberalism to the threat of quotas shows that when power enclaves are threatened, sociologically and psychologically, the dominant white society will instinctively oppose, limit, and restrict such changes. In such manner are the avenues to social and economic power effectively maintained. So the thing I'm getting out of this right here is that if you're talking about really getting real power, you're going to have to kick the door down. You're going to have to take that. You're going to have to fight for that. You're going to have to use whatever leverage you have, and you can't be polite about it. And so that means the closest thing I can think of, besides simply supporting Black-owned businesses and kind of not supporting economically businesses that are not in your community as much as you possibly can, is the elections are a wonderful opportunity for you to draw that line in the sand. The one time where white folks are more desperate than they ever are at any other time is when they're trying to win an election. When the Democrats and Republicans are fighting, that's your opportunity to make a power play. right? But what occurs is that you have the Sambo class in our community that is paid by those who have power to control black voters and to get them to show up to the polls for absolutely nothing. And they use triggers. They lean on fear. They lean on all sorts of ridiculously silly stereotypical things that are designed to manipulate you into giving your vote away for free. I've never told you guys not to vote. I've never said don't vote. I've just said don't vote for nothing. Don't vote when you're not getting what you want. If you don't get what you want, then you should not vote. And obviously, there are people that are going to use every trick in the book. They come to me and they say, why would you tell black people not to vote? You're a terrible person. I got banned from Ebony magazine because of that. I believe there was a lady in Ebony that I was going to publish one of my articles, and she said, you pissed somebody off big time in Ebony. And I said, really? And she told me the lady's name. I won't repeat her name, but she said that this lady said, we will never publish anything from Dr. Boyce Watkins, right? And it had to do with the fact that I just said, do what's best for you. If you feel that they're giving you something for your vote, then give them your vote. If you feel that they're not giving you something for your vote, then you can keep that vote to yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that statement. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what is wrong with that in the eyes of some is they're not accustomed to black people actually wanting something. They're not accustomed to the $2 hooker actually having some self-esteem, right? And demanding to be treated like a lady. They don't want that, right? They're like, wait a minute, everything. They're not used to going to Walmart and expecting to pay Walmart prices and having somebody say, no, you thought you were in Walmart, but really you're in Bloomingdale's. And instead of paying $2 for that pair of pants, you're going to pay $200 for that pair of pants because this is quality material. This is high value stuff. This don't come cheap no more. And that's going to make people upset. So let me dig a little deeper into this. He keeps talking about conservatives for a while, and I'm going to skip that. On page 22, there's another section called "Government's Conservatism Alienates Blacks," and I'm going to let you guys kind of go take a look at that. But what I'm going to jump to is page 24 in "Black Labor, White Wealth" by Dr. Claud Anderson, where he talks about the death of the civil rights movement. Now, this is fascinating because the civil rights movement, again, because we go to school and we have this white teacher who teaches us Black history, which is kind of awkward and silly, but we're used to it. And they tell us how wonderful the civil rights movement was in every way. And it does not mean that the people didn't make a sacrifice in the civil rights movement. But one thing you have to really understand is that a lot of who you consider to be your heroes from the civil rights movement, a lot of that's marketing. Certain people are marketed to you as your heroes, and it becomes almost sacrilegious to say that person's not my hero. So, for example, if I talk about a guy like a John Lewis, a lot of black people are triggered to become very offended when I say, well, I don't really know what John Lewis really ever did for me that was beneficial. I saw him do a lot of things for a lot of people, but he didn't do anything specifically for me, right? They say, oh, you can't say that. What's wrong with you? Well, who said you can't say that? Well, that comes from the fact that in your history book and on your TV set, and according to the government, they've told you John Lewis was this amazing guy, and that he's more important and more relevant than the community activist who really put his life on the line to really help black people and was really doing what black people needed to have done. Right. So in the minds of some, they're trained to believe that a John Lewis matters more than, say, a Dr. Claud Anderson. But I can tell you, when I heard John Lewis speak, I heard him speak about a lot of things, but I didn't hear him talk about the things that really mattered to me. But when you sit and you talk to a Dr. Claud Anderson, he will spend 6 hours, even in his 80s, he will sit there for 6 hours and talk about what's best for black people. Or if you listen to a Louis Farrakhan, same thing. I've sat with both of these guys in private with nobody watching, no cameras on, nothing, and they will talk for hours about how to improve the black condition. Those are your leaders. People like that are your leaders. The people that just happen to be black that are serving somebody else, those are not the people who are going to feed you. Those are not the ones who are going to take care of you. You might be proud of them because they received, validation. They were put on TV and someone gave them an award, and you think that makes them special because we're trained to be white supremacists. But those are not the people that matter for you. And so I think of the leaders. You can think of leaders like parents. Which parent is more relevant? Is it the fancy parent who has all the money, who never comes to see you except once a year, or is it that parent who's there with you every day, who feeds you every morning, who makes sure you get to school every day, who is there who knows everything about your life, who is there when you get sick, who's there for you on a regular basis? That's your true mother. That's your true father, the person that's there with you every day, not the fancy person that you see once a year who only shows up on Christmas and birthdays. Okay, so a lot of our black politicians are like that parent that shows up at Christmas and birthdays, and they don't even know we could get sick and go to the hospital and die, and that person doesn't even know that we were sick. Okay, so the death of the Black Civil Rights Movement. For everyone but the caretakers of old Black civil rights organizations, the rights movement for Blacks is dead. Civil rightism for Blacks had a brief life for the second time within a 100-year period, reaching a point of diminishing returns, then died a premature death during the late 1960s. Let me drink some coffee. All of the rights gained by the civil rights movement have been bequeathed to groups that are more acceptable to the larger society: women, gays, Hispanics, Asians, handicapped, and poor whites. The first Black civil rights efforts formally started shortly after the Civil War, as slaves realized that they had received paper freedom and unexercisable rights. For nearly a century, they pursued their phantom freedom and rights nationally by way of public forums, courtrooms, schoolhouses, union halls, and journalism. In the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education desegregation decision, Blacks won a battle, but the decision had incalculable destructive effects on the Black community. During the subsequent civil rights protest period, Blacks stimulated a rush of a new social movement by a melange of social groups, which piggybacked on Black causes in their own quest for rights and freedoms. This offended the larger society in general and gave conservatives grounds to orchestrate a backlash. Since Blacks were the largest, most visible, and least acceptable group, they became the primary target of conservatives' angst. So basically, because I'm on page 24, by the way, Tanua, 24, Black Labor, White Wealth. So effectively, what he's basically saying is that because Black people are easily identifiable, Black people don't have any true friends. You can do pretty much anything to Black people, and it's okay. We become easy targets, right? Even if you look at things like the situation with the Bill Cosby case, and I know people have different opinions on that, and you have every right to have every opinion that you might have. You don't have to agree with anything that I've ever said about that case. The interesting thing about the Cosby case is that, there's this interesting outrage toward Cosby that doesn't really exist for all the other things in the world that we could be outraged about. There's a lot of people in Hollywood that do some of the most egregious things. Sometimes they even do these things to children. And there's no outrage about that, no conversation about that. It's like nothing to see here. But with Cosby, it's like, we got to get that guy. We must get him to prove that justice exists in the world, right? Why just him? Why just him? Why, if he were a white woman, would the rage be? I mean, Cardi, or even a Black woman or a white man. Cardi B confessed to doing pretty much exactly what Bill Cosby did. There's no outrage there, right? So the Black person, particularly the Black male, is an easy target. It's easy to take them down. It's easy to go and do whatever. So you have to realize that. So let's see here. It says the movement was drowned out. And by the way, everybody who's listening online, I'm about to shut down this feed. If you want to join the rest of the conversation, log in at blackkeystogreatness.com. If you go into the curriculum section, there's a link to the Zoom. So you go to the private Zoom, go to blackkeystogreatness.com. You can join for free. It doesn't cost you anything. And you can actually come into the book club. And we do this every Wednesday night at 8:30. So feel free to come on in. All right, guys. So I'm about to shut this down now. In 3, 2, 1, and go. Have a good day.